Another major topic is how do you track your money? Do you in effect need an accounting system? Now, does this require an expensive piece of personal financial software? In my case, I've never found that necessary, but I do have a very definitive audit trail of all of my purchases and income. My wife and I use one checkbook account. Any bills that we pay with checks are recorded by the bank. She has a credit card. I have a primary credit card. We do have some other credit cards for backup, but all of her credit purchases are on her credit card account. All my purchases are on my credit card account. So by merging the transactions from the checkbook, which also has automatic deposit, and the credit card accounts, we get a consolidated view of our accounts. Now, we do buy some things with cash, and if that's a material percentage of our purchases, you can record that by having a cash journal. Simply write down the date, the amount, and what you purchased. This will allow you to have the ability to look at the previous month, the previous 3 months, the previous year, and come up with an average of income and expenses. I personally usually only do this about every 3 months, and then you simply divide by 3 and you know your average monthly income and your average monthly expenses. Now, let's get into a little more formal accounting. There's 2 formulas that I want to share with you that are crucial to understanding money. One is income minus expenses equals net gain or loss. So if your income is more than your expenses, you have a net gain, which would be prima facie evidence that you're a saver. Now, if you have your income is less than your expenses and you are incurring losses, that would be prima facie evidence that you're a spender. The second major equation is assets minus liabilities, also called debt, equals net assets, or in effect your functional bankruptcy, that you have more debts or more liability than assets. By using your accounting system, you can determine what consistently is your income and consistently what your expenses are. This allows you to know your budget. Now, another major topic is that of charity. Should you tithe to your church? Should you give to the United Fund? My answer to that is yes. What goes around comes around. And I think that's an integral part of managing your money. Now, let's talk about a crucial area. That is investments. It's important that you get a net worth for investments. You want to be able to make money while you sleep. Now, within your investments, you want to understand some basic principles. One is liquidity. How fast you can take your investment and convert it to cash. So traditionally, real estate isn't a very liquid asset. It takes months, sometimes years, to convert the asset to cash. Versus a blue chip stock can be converted from the stock to cash in minutes. Another concept is that of risk. I submit to you there's always risk with any sort of investment. But if you're looking at the bluest of the blue chip stocks, and this is my personal opinion, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Microsoft, Apple, Disney, some of these index mutual funds, the risk is pretty minimal. Now, an important concept to know is I once read an article that it showed that from the late 1920s to about the year 2000, as I recall, on average, the New York Stock Exchange compounded at 8% a year. Now, this is not to say that in major periods it was way down. It was in the valley, and then other times it was up in a peak, if you will. But over that long period of time, the compounded interest was 8%. I read another report recently that said from 1990 to today, it's closer to 9.9%. Now, once again, as illustrated by the current highs and the valleys of 2008, there are a lot of fluctuations, but on average, it was quite approaching this 9.9. Let's stay with the conservative 8%. Within financial planning, there's what's called the rule of 72. It works out mathematically. If you take the number 72 and you divide it by your annual return on investment, in this case 8%, you'll get the number of years it takes to double your money. So 72 divided by 8 is 9 years. So if you invested $5,000 in 1976, by 1984, that would have increased to $10,000. And then it would have doubled again to $20,000, doubled again to $40,000, doubled to $80,000. And by the year 2020, it would be $160,000. This is why it's important to save as early as you can in your lifetime to allow this compounding money. Another area of possible investment is real estate, housing, or for really long-term investment, land. Now, as a rule of thumb, you have to live in a house about 7 years for it to increase in value. Now there's some anomalies with that rule. For example, how the real estate market is doing locally. Also, what your expertise is. If you've got a couple or several partners and you're adept at refurbishing houses, refinishing them, interior decorating, the choice of the right colors and so on, then you're into flipping. And some of that can be quite profitable. Another avenue for investments is gold and silver. In my experience, gold and silver maintains its value. I once read that in Roman times, a 1 ounce gold piece would buy you the finest shoes, the finest belt, the finest toga. Today, 1 ounce of gold sells for about $1,300, which would buy you an awful excellent pair of shoes, suit, and belt, shirt, and tie. It maintains its value over time for thousands of years in multiple cultures and countries. Is it possible to make money on it? Yes, with timing. In the 2008 run-up in gold, I made some money by selling some gold, and then when the price dropped down to $1,300, I repurchased coins. So it's a good way to maintain value. An important aspect of all of this is diversification. It's similar to when you want things to grow. You have to spread around the fertilizer. So similar, if you want your investments to grow, diversify into a number of different investments. Have real estate. Have a small percentage in gold and silver. Usually, the research has found that if you have 7 to 12 stocks and or mutual funds, that's sufficient diversification to minimize the risk of the stock market. I also submit to you that a really good investment is whatever money you spend on your education and training is an investment. It will come back to reward you. Let's talk about another major topic, that of safeguarding your financial situation. One of the major aspects of this is insurance for your automobile. In many states, if you're caught without automobile insurance, it's the same as a DUI, driving under the influence. Also, it's important to have health insurance. I know of 2 cases where people I've known tried to do without health insurance to disastrous results. Have life insurance. Now, I'm not a big believer in whole life where you earn, in effect, an equity over time. I prefer term life insurance, so you're getting the most for your money for life insurance to assist your loved ones after you're gone. Also have homeowners insurance. If you have your house paid off, it is just disastrous if your house is destroyed and there's no insurance for it. Usually if you have a mortgage on it, you're required to have mortgage insurance. Let me go to another area quickly and talk about how do you teach children about money. Well, one practice that we use with our 5-year-old granddaughter, who is the sun and moon to my wife and I, is when we agree that she can have something at a retail store, we give her the money and she goes up and hands it to the cash register person. Now, our granddaughter loves doing this. She feels like a big person, and I think that's part of the reward. However, I also think there's a very clear message. You can have this item, but you have to give them money. Also, I think it's entirely appropriate that children earn money for service and appropriate chores at home. And also that they have financial rewards for children tied to educational effort, achievement, and accomplishments of other worthwhile goals. As I've mentioned in my disaster preparedness films, you should appropriately be involved in a food storage and emergency preparedness program. And then a final topic to touch on is estate planning. There's 3 key areas that I want to impress here. One is to have a schedule of accounts. Now, what do I mean by this? Have a piece of paper where you list, these are the assets that I have. These are the account numbers, the customer service phone number, the balance and date of the last statement or a recent statement. This will allow whoever is settling your estate to readily see what assets you have. Also on that schedule of accounts, list any debts you have, credit cards, bills. So, what credit card, account number, customer service number, and a date and balance from a recent statement. This will allow the person settling your estate to know what debts you have. Have a will. Now, if it's a simple I love you will, you could perhaps obtain a standard form, fill it out, and this would be, upon your death, your estate goes to the one you love, and perhaps if you and your spouse jointly passed, it would be divided in a certain manner to your children. And then you need to have that notarized and signed by 2 witnesses. Now, if you're concerned about if it's being legal, by all means, go see an attorney. It'll be well worth the money to pay them to have peace of mind. Now, if it's more than a simple I love you will, I would encourage you to see an attorney. I think it would be money well spent to have it properly done. The third item is have a medical power of attorney. Virtually all hospitals have a form for this that you can walk in as just someone in the public, and they'll give you the form, you fill it out, you have the appropriate people witness it, and you give it back or carry it with you. This allows you to determine what is going to happen if you become incapacitated. You don't want to have, as they're coding you, your relatives fighting over should they resuscitate you or should they not. You want to decide this ahead. You want to be in charge of your fate. So in conclusion, I would say there are some references. There's many references on personal financial management. Just 3 that I would mention that are pertinent to investments is 2 of them are very old books. One is called The Money Game, and the author's pen name is Adam Smith. There's a second book that he wrote called Super Money by Adam Smith. And then the third source, I would submit to you that you read 3 or 4 books about the philosophy and the investment advice of Warren Buffett. He is one of the all-time, if not the greatest investor. He's been very generous with his life philosophy and with his advice about investing, and your time spending learning about his philosophy, both life-wise and investment, will be well spent. So I hope these words of pearls of wisdom will have been benefited for you in your life preparedness. Be prepared.